what did a typical day in the life of my writing process look like? Well, I wrote, I dare say, 90% of this book from within the gates of the School of St Jude. I could hear the lessons happening as I was sitting in my room tapping away on my laptop. I could hear the bus engines revving after a long day of dropping our students home after school. I could smell the beans and the maize being cooked for school lunch. And so it was an all-immersive experience, and sometimes I did need to set foot off of the school grounds just so I could maintain a sense of perspective and a certain distance, because I was conveying stories that had a deep personal impact on my own life and on my own point of view. And as someone who'd already been living at the school for nearly 5 years when I started writing, I knew that keeping perspective was going to be important in conveying the whole story. My name is Madeleine Kelly. I currently live in Adelaide, South Australia, but I spent nearly 6 years living and working at the School of St Jude in Tanzania. And in that time, I wrote The School That Hope Built, which we're celebrating the first anniversary for. Well, my parents are both very creative people with backgrounds in education, and my father was and is a writer to this day. He's got 3 of his own published works of poetry, and he's currently working on his 4th book of poetry. So I suppose you could say that I was always inspired by my family, but I was also really inspired by my teachers. I was very, very fortunate to have a great education, and I really developed a passion for reading through exposure to a range of works in my school library. And this is kind of what I guess encouraged me to pursue a career in writing eventually. I first heard about the School of St Jude when I was just 16 years old in the classroom at my school, St Aloysius College in Adelaide, and our teacher showed us an episode of Australian Story, which is how I know many Australians first learnt about the School of St Jude, and I was incredibly inspired by the work being done to fight poverty through education, and I knew that one day I'd like to go and visit. But that eventually ended up in me applying for a contract as a writer at the school for 18 months. And to my surprise, after I finished university, that was my very first job. And I set foot on the plane to Tanzania with a one-way ticket on May the 3rd, 2017, and loved it so much that I then stayed right up until the book was launched in 2023. Well, it's a bit of a story, but basically in 2019 I was travelling with Gemma, helping her for her annual promotional tour for St Jude's, and we met with a supporter who said to Gemma, you know, the first book about St Jude's was so fantastic and we'd love an update, because the very first book that Gemma published ends with her first grade of students finishing primary school. And now, as we know, we've got hundreds of graduates, indeed hundreds of people in university and working in their chosen fields. And so there was a lot to update supporters on. And at the time it was the pandemic, and it was a time for us at the school to really take stock and contemplate the upcoming 20-year anniversary of the school and all that had been achieved. And so when Gemma invited me to collaborate on writing the book, of course I jumped at the opportunity with enthusiasm. It took a full year to get The School That Hope Built from being 0 pages to being the book that you see today, but really I could have spent a whole nother year working on it, because there were so many stories to flesh out and build upon, but I wanted to leave the reader with a sense of wanting more, while also having a holistic and full view of the school as it is. The process of writing The School That Hope Built was really interesting. I'd always had certain ideas around what the life of a writer might look like, and I didn't realise quite how much of it is involved with sitting in quiet contemplation, and obviously rigorous research went into this book. So I spent perhaps a solid 4 months of interviews with people who you meet in this book, both in Tanzania and around the world, supporters, board directors who've been involved for many years, as well as the students, the families, the staff, indeed former staff, to really capture the essence of the story and the growth of the school over 20 years. So I spent a long time sitting down and manually typing out transcripts, and also finding ways to try and weave each person's story and memory into a linear narrative that the reader could really follow a journey from the school's fledgling beginnings as a school that opened with 3 students and 1 volunteer teacher to now the educational juggernaut that it is. I learnt so much about life through the process of writing The School That Hope Built, but I think the thing that I take away most is that no matter who you're speaking to, people just want to be seen and heard, and they want their story validated. Whether it was me sitting in the home of a child who goes to St Jude's, who's at the very beginning of their educational journey, or whether it's speaking to a graduate who is now studying on a full external scholarship in New York, or whether it was speaking to a board director in the United States. Every person has their own unique take on the School of St Jude's, but every single person has something special that they want to say about how it's impacted their lives. And so for me, I learnt a lot about that. And I also learnt a lot about the resilience and the courage and the hope that the families of St Jude's students really demonstrate when they very first set foot through St Jude's gates for their initial assessment is incredible, considering the circumstances and the adversity that they face. And I really wanted this to be carried through in the story so that the reader can feel like whatever it is that they are facing in their own lives, they too can step forward with that same sense of hope and resilience and courage. And I think that that is what the universal story is in The School That Hope Built.